'Tis true my form is something odd, but blaming me is blaming God. Could I create myself anew, I would not fail in pleasing you. If I could reach from pole to pole, or grasp the ocean with a span, I would be measured by the soul. The mind's the standard of the man. That was a poem called False Greatness that Joseph Merrick, my main man, used as his signature when he wrote letters. And that poem was written by Isaac Watts, the same guy who wrote everyone's favorite song about the coming of the apocalypse. Joy to the world, the Lord is come, let earth receive her king. But I digress. Alright, what should I make today? Has anyone got any requests?
Make the elephant one next, please.
As you wish.
I originally came up with the concept for this elephant dude for a Turnip28 kit bashing contest called Life in Ruins, in which you were supposed to make either a siege weapon or a fortification. And that was about 6 months ago. So this guy, he took me a little bit longer to make than I had intended. But why did it take so long? Well, because each time I finished applying a step in the process, I would get frustrated with the result not looking the way that I wanted, and then I'd take a break and work on something else. And then that happened like 120 times over the course of this project. So, did I give up? Or did I rise above and power through? I guess you'll just have to watch the entire video to find out. The general concept is that this guy is intended to be the Great Proboscis for the March of the Proboscis army. So we got the front half of an elephant, and it's grafted onto a siege tower, and it's like the elephant is the engine driving the siege tower forward. While I was coming up with the idea for this guy, I was also getting back into Age of Empires 3. So this guy was reminiscent of the Indian Howdah units. Humla! And I figured that I would play off of that and lean into that aesthetic. I also knew that I couldn't just use a regular elephant, so I found an Indian elephant model online and popped him into Blender, and that's why he now has human ears and human eyes. As for the siege tower, I bought an MDF kit off of Etsy to use as a base, but that mostly ended up being a waste of money because it required a ton of modifications to the point where I barely even included any of the original pieces. So here's the lore I've got for my March of the Proboscis. These guys, they come and they smash down the walls of their enemies so that they can forcibly and violently give them possession of a white elephant that they then have to take care of for the rest of their life. Because, I mean, like, what are you going to do? You're going to get ownership of a white elephant and then you're going to not take care of it? That would just be rude. Now, this is the part where I'm going to do a very brief history of India. Our story begins in 3102 BC when Krishna gets shot in the foot and dissolves into light and leaves the earth, demarcating the beginning of the Kali Yuga cycle. Then we're going to skip ahead a couple thousand years and there's an advisor who's mad at his king. And he's like, grr, I'm going to untie my shikha and then I'm only ever going to retie it once my friend has taken your throne. And that friend's name was Chandragupta. So our friend CG runs the last Nanda king through with a spear and he forms the Mauryan Empire. And this is going to be our first big centralized empire in India. Then CG dies of a suicide ritual where he literally fasts to death, which is pretty metal. But he has a grandson named Ashoka. The goat! The goat! Who does some conquery stuff, but then he becomes a Buddhist and was really tolerant and overall a pretty cool dude, and then he dies and the whole empire falls apart. Then a few years later, a couple thousand miles away, there's a dude in a cave who's gonna get visited by an angel, and then he invents a new religion, and that's gonna lead to the Delhi Sultanate now being the big cheese of India. Then there's this guy named Babur, and he follows in the footsteps of his ancestors Genghis Khan and Timur, and he starts playing Mountain Blade Warband in real life, and he's running around from village to village, and he gathers an army to go and fight the Sultan. The Sultan decided to go all in on Fast Fortress into elephant elephant spam, so Babur just hard countered him with a cannon boom. After the first volley was fired, all the elephants turned around and they ran away and they trampled the Sultan's army. And from this victory, Babur was able to start the Mughal Empire. Then Babur had a son who fell down the stairs and died. But then Stair Guy had a son named Akbar.
The goat! The goat!
And he was another really tolerant, cool dude. He didn't do that one thing that a surprising amount of leaders over the course of history did, where he locked away some kids and never let anyone talk to them so that he can figure out what the true divine innate language of humanity is. And it turns out they started speaking Esperanto. Who knew? Then Akbar had a grandson who made the Taj Mahal, and then that guy had a son named Aurangzeb. And the Mughals are Muslim, but the vast majority of India is Hindu. So when this guy decided to go from all in on religious tolerance to all in on intolerance, things went not good, and he usually gets credited with collapsing the Mughal Empire. Now we can talk about the guys that I am using as the inspiration for the soldiers that will be riding atop the Howdah Tawa. And I made 8 of them so that they can be used to represent the 8 wounds of the Great Proboscis, or they could also be used as 2 units of chaff. We are talking Sepoys. They're what we would call class collaborators. They start off as soldiers for the Mughal Empire, but they become enforcers for the British East India Company. And the Ba'ik are basically Tyranids, at least in terms of their efficiency for extraction, but for money instead of biomass. And then in 1857, there's an event, which depending on your opinions on things, this is either called anywhere from the Sepoy Mutiny to the First War of Indian Independence. And there were a whole lot of contributing factors that led to this, but the most commonly cited one is that the Sepoys were issued Lee Enfield rifles, which used these paper cartridges, which you would tear open with your teeth, and then you'd pour in the powder and jam in the paper and the bullet. But in order to make a proper seal, the paper was greased, and that grease was very possibly made with beef tallow, which made Hindus mad because cows are a holy animal, and or possibly contained pig fat, which would be haram for Muslims. And it was really messy, as all rebellions are, but it ended a year later when the British Crown basically said to the East India Company, like, okay, little brother, hand over the controller, let me show you how colonization is really done. That's when you got the British Raj, but then India does eventually get their independence, but things continue to be pretty rough for India until 2157 when they became the first nation to invent true AGI. But then in 2001, things got really bad again when the water wars started. Let's take a quick little intermission. How did my first foray into the world of professional art go? And by that I mean, how much money did I make off of Discombobulus? Well, he sold for the starting bid of $28, which I'm not gonna lie, was a little bit dispiriting, but I do feel like for anyone who has ever tried to make money off of stuff that they've created, it is a canon event for them to not start off with a success. So my copium is that this is like my rite of passage. But, Godspeed to the guy who did buy him. I do hope that he serves you well, and lesson learned for next time. Just don't randomly bid stuff off on eBay. I could not find any accessible Sepoy miniatures, so call to action if any mini companies are watching. Someone make a plastic kit for Sepoy mutineers. But these guys are made from Nazim Fusilier Ottoman infantry bodies, Ashigaru arms, and the heads are from British Indian Great War troops. Let's finish these guys up. I'm going with the classic RCA connector color scheme here. Then we can slather them with an oil wash. Next, we're gonna pop them off of their cups. And now we can finally glue them onto their bases. And back to the elephant. Did you know there was an elephant that was given the name Osama bin Laden after it went on a 2-year-long rampage and killed 27 people? Indian officials issued a shoot-on-sight directive for Osama bin Laden, and an elephant matching his description was shot, but that did happen 50 miles away from his last known location. So it is possible that Osama bin Laden might still be lurking out there. Here's another elephant fun fact. Did you know execution by elephant, that was used as a form of capital punishment by royalty in India up until the 19th century? By fun fact, I mean the opposite. Also, elephants can get PTSD and can be trained to be instinctually cruel. So that sucks, but this would make for a really sick tall man. And here's an example of why I find acrylic washes so irksome, because somehow this stained all the raised surfaces without actually going into the recesses at all. Here I'm doing some intentionally placed shading with a dark desaturated purple. Now I'm doing a glazy, highlighty sort of deal on the skin. I'm dry brushing the wood a bright red to bring back that texture. Then I'm punching all those yellows back up. And here I'm giving him a freehand forehead marking. Next we'll do an oil wash like I just showed him the first time. He's got to make sure no funny business is going on inside the tower, so we'll glue some eyes in there. Then we'll pop the shields off the stick. And finally we can glue on all these fiddly bobs. And here's a little bonus dude I made that I'm going to call the Hound of Tripolos.
ये मुसलमान का खून ये हिंदू का खून बता मुसलमान का कौन सा हिंदू का कौन सा बता साले बनाने वाले ने फर्क नहीं किया तू कौन आता फर्क करने वाला
I am quite glad that I stuck through with him. He is officially my biggest miniature ever, even taller than my tall man. I was questioning whether or not I should actually base him, but I decided ultimately not to because he's basically a vehicle and he just stands perfectly fine without one. I could grumble for many a minute about all the things that I think I could have improved, but overall I'm quite happy with him. Though I do fear he would be a real struggle to actually transport and use as a game piece. Also, I made him bleed oil as a reference to the flavor text that describes him as potentially crawling out of a oil lake and swill. And here is Bolitis. He is the top of the army, and in the rules he is described as both the Silent Watcher and the Living Foghorn. So my synthesis between these two seemingly conflicting ideas was to give him a little pipe, a little tube that he can speak into, and then have the words come out of the mouths of his fungal steed. I also gave him a little beetroot heart mom tattoo that I thought was cute. And here is Greg. His lore is that he looks really scary, but he's actually useless in combat. He just really likes gardening. And here are the turnip sepoys. I gave them red base rims, both because the tower they're going to be on is made of red wood, but also to more clearly indicate that they're meant to be health tokens. Well, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and or are maybe inspired to stick through a tough project of your own and make something really, really cool. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Slow clap the crap they call him governance more than a rap man we're reforming governments full on attack man